The last video in our series is a little bit more on how taking the concepts of cost distance to like a level where you start to get a bit more abstract with them. And the kind of joking thing I'm going to set up here is, let's still try to travel in the shortest distance, but let's also take into consideration something weird. Let's pretend that all of these areas in yellow here are places where we know that one of our ex-partners hangs out a lot. And we are just doing whatever we can. We do not want to be seen by our ex. It was bad blood in the breakup, and we'd like to avoid it wherever possible. So, what if we know our exes are hanging here? We learned some techniques last week that can maybe help us. So I actually brought in the terrain raster that you have. I'm not going to run it again here, but I calculated a visibility on that as well. Now I added some points to my X sighting, so if you choose to make this video, I'll tell you what I mean by that in the end. You can choose to add your own points wherever you want. Just give them a value of like 6 feet above the ground. But right, these are all the areas where my X's, given that terrain, could see and could not be seen. And I turned that essentially into, I went into reclassify, and I actually reclassified this so that anywhere that my X's could see me get a value of 30, and anyway they couldn't see me gets a value of 1. And I did this so that what I could actually do is then go into raster calculator, and what if I multiplied that, right, this almost multiplier of like it's 30 times more intense or 30 times more costly for my X to see me, and multiplied that by the original cost distance we created, right, the one that was just first cost, that was just removing the roads and removing the buildings. And I'll give it a name here of like X cost. X site cost. And really it's going to look very similar to that original, cost distance map that we had back in the day. Give me one moment here. Right, except the difference is in my X cost map right here, X site cost, is that it costs me 1 to root on any of these areas as normal, but that there's a number of cells that have been given the value of 30 because these are areas where my X could likely see me, right? So they have now increased, and it is like a 30% more, or 30 times, not but 30%, 30 times more intense for me to walk through those areas. I know I'm being abstract here, but that's the point. I'm trying to introduce this tool in an abstract fashion as well. Walking through any of those areas would feel so bad for me that I might get seen that maybe I want to factor that into my calculations, right? This is that original path that I would take, and it brings me like into kind of X country through here, and definitely through here. So maybe I need to modify it a little bit so I'm minimizing the risk of going through one of those heavily areas where I could be potentially sighted by my X for a longer period of time. And let's do that literally the same way we would do the regular cost distance. We would come in, go to cost distance, always coming from that origin point. Except the cost raster here is now my X site cost. And maybe I'll call this my X cost distance so I can see. XCD, and then I'll make a backlink that I'll call XBL. Will be my X backlink. Remember, backlink is just directions. And again, this one is might not look too different, but you'll see like certain areas that look really like odd. Like these areas seem like there are these odd little islands where things are much more costly. And that's because if I were to turn it off, right, those are big pools of where the X can be seen. So it actually would be a very excessive cost to go through one of those areas. And the cool thing is that I've taken my like abstract cost here, right? My just distance I would travel, and then given it this multiplier so that it feels more intense because my X could be watching me. Plug that same thing into the path, right? I'm headed to my destination. My cost distance is my X cost distance. My backlink ranker is, or backlink raster is my X backlink. Call this maybe my X path. Same thing before, so we can visualize this much better. I'm going to come right down into focal statistics, neighborhood, focal statistics. Drag it in there. Call it X wide. Give it an 8x8, just like we've been doing for each previous iteration here. And we've created something totally new. Right? This was my original path in blue that, as I had mentioned, brought you into that kind of X country, right? There's that risk that you're going to have to pass through that big area here and up here. So the actual new one added a little bit of distance, but it snaked around those areas where it can't be seen, hugged the edge here, cut up at a diagonal, went right on the building and snuck right at the small pass part there. Went through the diagonal and then continued on the same path. So again, it's not like a thing, you're not going to take this to your professor and be like, hey, it actually only cost me 3,352 X distance feet to get to and from. But visually, this can be very helpful, right? It's an abstract tool that allows you to incorporate other things beyond just time and distance into determining how you might move through a landscape. So this is the final video on the series. If you choose to make a video of this one's a choice. I will give you an extra credit, point of extra credit. The way you'd have to do it is simply take the X sightings and add more if you want, and then incorporate like whether or not your X can see you into some fashion into the cost algorithms, and then run a cost distance operation for me, and I'll give you an extra credit point. All right, students, have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you when we're all back.